Hello, Julie here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a layout I'm creating using my design team kit products from Kraft Supplies for you. They have two stores and I will put a link to both of their stores in the description box below. All of the papers I'm using on this layout are from KS4U's Stargazer collection. The first thing I'm going to do is trim a piece of white cardstock to 11.5 inches by 11.5 inches. To create a border around my white cardstock, I use this piece of cardstock which is called Milky Way, and I trim the branding strip off and then cut a 1-inch frame. So I cut the middle of the cardstock out, so I'm just left with a 1-inch frame. I use my distressing tool and distress the edges of the cardstock, both types. I actually distress the edges of everything on this layout. I distress it with my distressing tool and also a KS4U black ink cube. If you don't have a distressing tool, you can use the edge of your scissors for this. Now I'm going to attach the white cardstock on top of the pattern paper using some double-sided tape. To add some texture to the background, I'm going to use this Gazaz stencil called Distressed and some Montmartre modelling paste, which is white when it's dry, and use my palette knife to put the modelling paste through the stencil. I'm going to use these sort of like diamond shapes. I apply the modelling paste to several areas on my page. Now I'm going to set that aside to dry, and while I'm waiting for it to dry I'm going to create some embellishments for my layout. I've got a stamp that came in my kit from Hero Arts and it's got a lovely flower in it. I'm going to stamp that using my embossing ink onto some of this pattern paper. It's a very light bluey grey colour, and I'm going to heat emboss it using Ranger's Embossing Antiquities. Cobalt is the colour. I will make 9 flowers, but I'll end up having 4.5 flowers because I'm going to layer them on top of each other. So I fussy cut all of the flowers. On half of them I've cut out just the patterned petals, the 4 darker petals. To add a little more interest to the background and a bit of colour, I used Tattered Angel's Glimmer Mist in the colour Glacier, and I just used the sprayer, the pipe part of the sprayer, to just sprinkle some of that colour around. Once again I set that aside to dry, and while I was waiting for it to dry I decided to start shaping my flowers. So I'm using my flower shaping tool, which has got a ball on one end, and I'm just pushing into the back of each petal so that it has a raised sort of section on the front of the flower. I do the same thing to both layers of the flower. Then I add a little dab of glue and attach the 4 petal layer on top of the other layer and push down into the centre. To try and maintain a bit of that height, I'm adding a bit of, or actually a double layer of foam squares under those top 4 petals. To finish each flower off, I add a blue gem to the centre. Time now to start on my paper layers. I'm going to use 3 pattern papers behind my photo. This first blue floral one is 6 inches by 8 inches. The next one, which is the same paper that I used to make my flowers, is 2.5 inches by 7.5 inches, and then the blue sort of like wood panel paper is 2.5 inches by 7 inches. I'm going to have a bit of a play around now with some of the beautiful embellishments that were in my kit. This lovely cotton floral lace, I will definitely be using that on my layout. The black flower gems that you can see there, I will use some of that on my layout as well. And the black and silver ribbon that you can see to the right, some of that will also make its way onto my layout. At the moment though, I'm just playing around and seeing what I think might look good in what areas. I also got these Jolie's Boutique dimensional stickers called Scallop Dotted Icing Border. I'm going to use half of one of those in my cluster as well. Now that I've got a bit of an idea where I'm going with my embellishments, it's time to carry on work with my pattern papers. I'm going to use the wood grain blue to mat my photo. My photo is 5 inches by 7 inches, so I cut my blue 5 1/4 by 7 1/4 because I only want a very fine mat around my photo. You can see here that I have distressed and inked around the edges of my photo mat, and now I'm going to attach my photo using double-sided tape. As I said earlier, I have distressed and inked all of the edges of these pattern papers. Now it's time to start attaching them to my background. I'm using double-sided tape to do that. I'm going to use liquid glue to attach the ribbon and the floral lace. I also add some chipboard to the back of my photo and use glue to attach that to my layout. I'm going to add one of those beautiful diamante embellishments that's on the left there into my cluster now. When I add that to my layout, I use a piece of foam tape behind it because the back of it is concaved and it won't sit flat if I don't. Then I go ahead and use glue to attach all of my other embellishments to the page. I decided to make a little cluster up in the top left hand corner, so I cut a piece of the wood grain 3 inches by 1 inch and a piece of the pale blue 2 3/4 by 3/4, distressed and inked the edges, and I'm going to attach them up in the top of my page, as you can see here. I cut a piece of the black and silver ribbon to 3 inches long to go under my cluster papers. I had another one of those diamantic clusters, so I decided to add that to my little panel up here, and a flower and another one of those little black gem flowers as well. So I went ahead and used my liquid glue to attach them to the layout. I had this Gina's Designs chipboard in my kit, so I thought I'd use one of the smaller butterflies out of it. I'd ink it up with my embossing ink and then use the same embossing powder that I used on my flowers to colour that. I gave the butterfly 2 coats of embossing powder and it came out quite a lot darker than the flowers. I used my glue to attach the butterfly to the top left of the photo so that it just overlapped slightly. The photo's of my mother and it was taken earlier this year. The title for my page is from Kazaz. It's a chipboard piece and it comes from the pack called Family Words. It said Loved Ones, but I've cut the S off so it just says Loved One, and I'm using some white acrylic paint to paint over the top of the chipboard. I allowed that to dry and then used my glue to attach it to the bottom left section of the photo. That finishes my layout for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching my video, and if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love it if you would. Don't forget to pop over and check out Kraft Supplies for You. Their link will be in the description box below. Thank you for being here with me today.